This is 40K Today. More fun than a Games Workshop release party, and with a higher nerd count. Hi there, 40K friends, and welcome to 40K Today. This is your daily 15-minute news, views, and interviews show. We cover the whole hobby of Warhammer 40,000. We do it in a few minutes. I'm your host, Steve Joel, and today on the program, Adrian from Tabletop Titans is running hobby hangouts on the channel. He's a pro painter. He knows what he's doing, and they are awesome. So we catch up with him about that. And John speaks with top player Colin McDade about what Deathwatch get from the Psychic Awakening. All of that on the show, but first, there's some news to catch up on. We're running a poll on our Facebook and looking for the answer to this question. Have you tried playing the game on Tabletop Simulator? How's it going for you? So far, 65% of the people who've responded are saying no, never tried it. The comments from people who have tried it are pretty positive. We'd love your feedback on the Facebook page. It is 40K Today on Facebook. And while we're talking about Facebook, if you follow SN Battle Reports, you will be loving their posts showing off the armies that have been selected for the next No Retreat tournament. They get hundreds of applications from all over the world from people who want to go to this big event in Gibraltar. Some of the armies they're showing off that have made the cut for this next tournament are amazing. SN Battle Reports on Facebook. We also want to shout out to the team over at Bell of Lost Souls. They've created a great article going over the history of AI in the 40K universe and how it almost completely destroyed the Imperium during the Dark Ages. Our friends at Tabletop Titans have had to put their regular live-streamed battle reports on hold for obvious reasons. But they're still bringing us great content. Now, as someone who enjoys the painting side of the hobby a lot, I'm loving Adrian's hobby hangouts. The man does amazing work, so it was really great to catch up with him and talk about some painting tips and also find out what he's covering in this week's hangout. Adrian from Tabletop Titans, thanks so much for joining us again on the show. It's nice to have you back.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, Steve.
So last time we talked about a specific model, but I want to start this off by establishing your cred. You're a commissioned painter, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
So with the hobby hangouts, you are hosting these. Can you talk us through the environment that you're doing this in? Is this a home or a studio, or how are you setting this up?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is actually in our normal studio, but what we wanted to do was have a setup where we could basically run a solo show and sort of keep distance and everything. So we decided, okay, we'll have just one person on the camera. We do have our producer, Bridger, who's in the studio, but sort of separate from me. And it was this interesting challenge to how can we sort of recreate the environment at home, but also bring everyone together into this sort of digital community.
And you set it up so that you're doing, the last one, for example, was specifically focusing on painting yellows, which, as everybody who's ever painted a model knows, yellow and white are just the two nightmare colors to try and get right, which is cool. And you use an airbrush, but you also do painting. Do you have a favorite model to paint? Can I ask that? Is there a favorite model or a favorite faction maybe that you really enjoy?
Right. Well, definitely the favorite faction would be anything orcs and anything orc vehicle in particular. I love doing those dirty, rusty metals that I can play with anything I want, essentially.
Yeah, you know what you do really well is the check thing, which I struggle with, man. I've tried it and I really struggle. So other than yellows, painting checkers on things like orc vehicles or, when you see Harlequins, the people who can paint the diamonds on the Harlequins, I'm just like, man,
it's funny you should mention now. Actually, this week we're going to be doing a focus on that and how to use stencils to actually get those effects.
I was going to ask about stencils because that's the other thing I've seen some of your models, and I really want to try and recreate this. Is this kind of hexagonal stencil effect that you see on a lot of people use it on Eldar vehicles. I've got some Tau models, and I love the idea of because it features in a lot of the lore and a lot of the books is the hexagonal shapes that appear in their architecture, and I like the idea of maybe using that on a ghost keel or on a Tau battlesuit. So stencils are coming up in one of the future hobby hangouts. Is that this coming week?
Yeah, that's right, this week.
Okay, so the hobby hangouts are on a Thursday, the same as your Tabletop Titans battle reports have been. And so we've covered yellow. We're going to cover stencils. What are some of the other plans that you've got for the hobby hangouts? Is it going to be all about painting, or are you doing kit bashing and things as well.
We'll definitely be doing some kit bashing. That's obviously something that you know that I love.
Yeah.
And the main challenge will be, how do I take a subset of my bits and sprues and bring them and to the actual show and show that process without bringing a whole truckload. But we'll definitely be looking at that. Any sort of hobby techniques, right? It's really just, this is what I love to do. I want to kind of share some tips and tricks. And we also learn a lot from just discussing with the participants in each episode. So I'm excited to just try new things.
What I love, and you're just, because you are so good at what you do, what I love as a person I've only been in the hobby for about 3 or so years. And so for me, a lot of these techniques that you take for granted are things that I'm learning all the time. For example, I only recently YouTubed how to paint lenses. And it's simple, You're right? It's an easy thing, but the effect is so good when you get it right. So you learn these little things, just one little takeaway from what you guys are doing or what you're doing with your hobby hangouts. You get one little takeaway, you go away, you practice it a little bit, and suddenly this whole world opens up to you, and it makes the models so much better, just having one little new technique to do. And the way you do it, we've got a whole week to practice before we learn another one. So it's cool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that was a big push. We started with the airbrush last week, and that one in particular, I was like, okay, here are all of the mistakes that I've made, and here's how you can not make them. The things that I wish someone had just told me. And like you said, it's often just simple tricks that make a huge difference. Yeah,
the airbrush thing is interesting. A buddy of mine over here and I have both decided airbrushing is the next stage for us. But it's airbrushing, buying an airbrush, learning to airbrush, all of those things. It's really intimidating. So doing what you're doing and helping us out with a few tips, it's invaluable. And right now is the time to do it because we all kind of, we can't play. So,
yeah, exactly. Right. And that was kind of the first impetus where I said, well, let's try something that we don't normally do because this is the perfect opportunity.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot more painting. The first move for me was to try and learn how to play on Tabletop Simulator, which I've given up now. So I'm all focusing on the painting. Hey man, thank you so much for joining us. So Tabletop Titans is the channel. You can find it on YouTube. And it's Thursdays. What sort of time do the videos go up if people want to watch them live and actually hang out with you, which is the intent?
Yeah, we've been doing 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Okay, great stuff. Look, thanks so much for doing it. We appreciate that you found a way to kind of keep us entertained through this whole period, this very strange period around the world. So keep up the great work, man. Take care.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
That's Adrian from Tabletop Titans. The link to their YouTube channel is in our show notes. Make sure you tune in this Thursday evening. Next up on the program this week's faction focus is Deathwatch. They've had their psychic awakening via the pages of White Dwarf. What's in those pages? Was any of it useful? Are Deathwatch going to get up and smash face when tournaments start up again? Top player Colin McDade answers those questions for you next.
Today's episode of 40K Today is brought to you by Frontline Gaming. Frontline Gaming is a one-stop shop for all your Warhammer hobby needs, discounted products, American-made gaming mats and terrain, and a full line of miniatures painting service and daily hobby content. And this can all be found at frontlinegaming.org.
Welcome back. Let's get competitive for a minute. The Psychic Awakening is nearly complete. The latest faction to get their update was Deathwatch, thanks to White Dwarf magazine. So how did they do? John Damaris spoke to one of the best players in the world, Colin McDade, to see if the new strats and relics have actually awakened anything in Deathwatch.
All right, Colin, you're one of the best-known Deathwatch players, at least that I'm aware of. Why don't you talk about the new Psychic Awakening that came out in White Dwarf and let the people know how you kind of felt they did overall, and then maybe let's talk about a few things that you're excited to get on the table and, as soon as this pandemic thing leaves us behind a little.
Thanks, John. Great to be here. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this pandemic being over so we can start having events again and being able to get to practice on the table again. Deathwatch, I'm a little, it's hard to quantify how I feel about them. It's like a mixed bag. On the one hand, like we got an update, but on the other hand, it's not exactly what I'm sure what most Deathwatch players like myself were hoping for. I guess in terms of like a report card grade type thing, I'd probably say they're like a B- or C+. Because I mean, we did get an update with all the Space Marine strats, but on the downside, it was kind of just like all the generic Space Marine strats that all the other codexes got with the new Doctrines ability and everything else. But we didn't get anything unique. So, I mean, that's kind of the downside of it.
Okay. Well, let's talk about what are some of the things that you got you think that's really going to mesh well with Deathwatch. What's going to help them become a little more competitively viable in the new meta?
So I think Doctrines is probably the biggest winner, I think, in my opinion, for Deathwatch. Being able to add that extra AP onto their Stormbolters and just even like their Primaris, which I'm thinking actually are pretty viable now with combining with Doctrines, is definitely worthwhile. Even before the Intercessor spam got popular, I could tell my Deathwatch Stormbolters with Hellfire rounds weren't really like doing enough punch against the targets I needed to. But now with that extra AP on it, it definitely makes it a big boost in the terms of strength. That's the biggest thing I think that's important. But as well as the Chaplain getting litanies, that's the other huge thing, because all the Deathwatch strats center around like targeting different aspect units. So when you have the Deathwatch Chaplain having litanies, now you have a free +1 to wound, which would normally cause you to spend 2 CP to just get that ability. So now having to only have to take a 72 or 90 point guy to be able to get that ability for free, which saves Deathwatch CP on having other strats or even comboing it. So now they can get an easy way to have +2 to wound on anything in the game, which is huge in my opinion for Deathwatch now.
Yeah, it makes that Stormbolter fire that they can spam so effectively get to be really, really dangerous. Because I mean, it was already dangerous before, right? Like, Hellfire rounds were just amazing. So just adding more two buffs to those is kind of a big deal, because you tell me, I'm just an outsider looking in, right? But it seems to me that's one of the core strengths for Deathwatch is just their ready access to cheap Stormbolters, their ready access to cheap Storm Shields, their mixed units that can really be deceptively difficult to remove because the different types of saves that are in there. Like they're a very equipment heavy army, I would say.
Exactly. I still think the veterans are the best way to go, but I've actually been toying with intercessor squads recently, because I actually think the Hellfire rounds actually work on all the intercessor rifle types. So being able to have Stalker bolt rifles that wound on 2s against anything in the game is really huge. And being able to add +2 to wound on that makes it really strong. But like the veterans with the Storm Shields are still so good at soaking up firepower, because all small arm fire you can tank on the Terminators, and then any anti-tank weapons that they want to try to shoot at the squad, you can just tank on a Storm Shield, which is still such a huge benefit to them.
And then they all have Stormbolters. So
yeah, exactly.
They just tear things up. So very cool. So was there anything else that you got in the Psychic Awakening that you're kind of excited to get on the table?
So I'm actually just painting up my Watchmaster right now. I've had him like primed for months now, but I never really saw a huge use for him before. But with the way the meta is looking right now, Possess being such a huge thing, I'm starting to think that like you really can't leave home without that reroll all failed hits, which unfortunately a couple of things weren't even updated to be current with some of the Deathwatch rules, like the Watchmaster rerolling failed hits instead of all hits like the Space Marine captains do, which is kind of a bummer, but I still think it's worthwhile bringing in a Deathwatch army now.
Yeah. I mean, you can't underestimate those rerolls, right? They do a lot. Last question. How do you feel overall about Deathwatch? Do you think that you're going to be able to be competitive, and will you use them pure, or will you put them in like, they don't break Space Marine doctrines if you put them in Space Marine lists, right? Like we'll use a add a couple Space Marine detachments with them, or will you use them in pure Imperial soup? Like, what do you think the direction is going to be?
So I guess it depends on where the fat goes, because right now they have the ability to roll back doctrines as well as the pre-nerfed version of Duty Eternal. But I mean, I really think that GW is going to fag it to where current Space Marines are. I don't see any reason why they would make Deathwatch special in this regards, unfortunately, because I mean, people might say that, oh, these stratagems are going to be different because they just rolled it out in the White Dwarf, but people have to remember they put these rules out like ready to print 6 months in advance. So the strats that they've gotten, like adaptive strategy that lets you tone down the doctrines and Duty Eternal, those are going to get nerfed. So I think they have some potential, more potential than before, obviously being pure, but they still kind of lack in the anti-tank department. So I think the best bet going forward is to souping them, because something that they didn't get updated, which actually works out in their favor, are the psychic powers. So even though they didn't get the buffed, Null Zone, their Might of Heroes still works on all Adeptus Astartes units. So if you're going to soup them with, like, say, Blood Angels, well, now you can still throw Might of Heroes from the Deathwatch Librarian onto the Blood Angel Smash Captain. So now you have a Strength 10 Smash Captain going into Knights or anything else, pretty much winning everything in the game on 2 still, which is huge in my opinion, to be able to have that ability to soup with other Imperium stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. I could also see that being pretty cool on a Space Wolf Smash Captain, right? So very, very smart. All right, Colin, thanks for the update, and we'll catch you soon.
Oh, you're welcome, John. Thank you for having me.
That's Colin McDade speaking with John Damaris. Now, before we say goodbye, it's time for our model of the day.
It's the model of the day, the model of the day, the model of the day.
So today's model of the day was sent in to us by a listener. Quentin Alexander has been playing 40k since 3rd edition. He has Blood Angels, Astra Militarum armies, Salamanders, and the model we're featuring today is a massive Castellan Knight that looks like it was painted to support his guard forces. The mighty Knight Arcanus is brought to life with reds and whites and some amazing metallics and so many guns. You can see pictures of the Knight on our Facebook and get all the details as well. Thanks, Quentin, for sending your model of the day into us. Now, if you have a model that you want to feature on the show, or if you've seen a model you think should be a part of the show, let us know. And that's it for today. Thanks for joining us again. A big thank you to content producer Alex Painter, our social media guru Tanya Gates, and our technical producer Seamus Ronan for all their work in getting this show put together. If you have anything that you think we should be putting on the program, please get in touch. Let us know what's going on. If you've got an amazing army or a YouTube channel or a hobby tip or just anything at all, contact us via Facebook. We'd love to hear from you. And make sure you join us tomorrow. We've got a playing tip. That is a tournament tip, a competitive tip from the one and only Brad Chester. And we meet a man on the bottom of the world in a tiny little town on the west coast of New Zealand who, just by fluke of chance, has managed to keep his local community in models and brushes and paints. He's managed to keep them going. We'll meet him tomorrow on the show. We'll see you then. Until then, for the whole 40K Today team, I'm Steve Joel, and that's what's happening in 40K Today.